Hello, hello, good evening. It's Monica from Life is Art and Scrap. It's almost Monday. Let's create. We are going to be creating a layout this evening that I'm calling a bits and pieces layout because we are going to be using the Cozy Up collection that we have been using all month, and I am down to just bits and pieces. So in order to create a layout tonight, I had to use just bits and pieces. And I know that that is something that all of you have to do every once in a while when you're down to just the last little bits and you've made layouts and you've made cards and there are just little bits and pieces left. So that's what we're going to do tonight. And this layout was inspired by a Pinterest post by Lacey Robin. Used her inspiration for what I'm going to do in the background of this layout. Now, I'm starting with a piece of Shortbread cardstock, and I'm going to use the light side. So if I fold it over like this, you can see that there's a dark side and a light side to the Shortbread, and almost all of our cardstock is like this. And so the dark side is the true color side, and the back side is the just a lighter version of that. And so I'm going to go ahead actually and add a little bit of adhesive to the back of my layout so it will hopefully stay in place while I create, because we're going to need to do a little bit of work on this. If you're joining me live, just say hello or howdy so I know you're here. And if you're watching later on replay, you can just say replay. I know I say the same message every time, but I like to hear from you guys. So if you're watching me, be sure to comment in the, or add a comment into the comments while you're watching. So I'm going to start out by doing a really light pencil line just to find the center of my page to create the background with bits and pieces. Sometimes you need to do a little bit of measuring to make sure everything finds its right place. So I'm just going to measure on my Versamat 6 inches vertically and at the 6-inch mark horizontally as well, and a super light pencil line. Okay, so now that we've found our center, we're going to know where to start by adding our bits and pieces. Now, when you have bits and pieces, and I'm going to use some white daisy for this example, when you have bits and pieces left, you sometimes have enough to cut a 1/2-inch strip of something. And I'm just reaching behind me to grab another Versamat so I can just stack Versamats here, because I need the lines on my Versamat in order to show you what I want you to do with your 1/2-inch strips. So I'm just using plain cardstock to show you, because you'll be able to see it better as I'm drawing the lines. But I use pattern paper for my layout, okay? But I'm just showing you the process. So what you're going to do is you're going to get some 1/2-inch strips. Now, some of my 1/2-inch strips were only 3 inches long. Some of them were a full 12 inches long. It just depends on what kind of bits and pieces you have left over. Hey, Carol, just joining us. Awesome. We only just started, so you're good. Good evening, Michelle. So I've got my 1/2-inch strips, and just a reminder that zip strips are 1/2 inch. The little zip that you cut off your piece of pattern paper before you start creating. So you're going to take your 1/2-inch strip, and what you want to create is an angled strip to create this pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come along the bottom of my piece of cardstock, and I'm going to mark it at 1/2 inch with my pencil. I'm going to make a tick mark at 1/2 inch. Then I'm going to go, and that's on the bottom side of the cardstock. Then I'm going to go to the top side of my cardstock and mark it at 2 inches. And then I'm going to come back down to the bottom and mark it at 2.5. Now that's the measurements to give me one strip. So then I want to make more than one strip, because this particular background that I'm going to show you takes 24 strips, okay? So that is going to be cut to create one strip, but we can keep going because we can make another angled strip. We have enough space. So we've already got our 1/2 inch mark here at this 2.5 inch spot. That's our 1/2 inch mark, because what we're going to be doing, and I'll just draw it on here, we're going to be trimming from this point to our first mark, and then we're going to be trimming from this 2 inch mark at the top to the 2.5 inch mark at the bottom. And that's going to create our 2 angled lines. Well, now this next piece has already got this angle. So this is our 1/2 inch now. And so then we need to mark at 2 inches on this side. Well, 2 + 2 = 4. I can do that kind of math. And then at the bottom, instead of going to 2.5, since this was marked at 4, we're going to 4.5. And then we're going to trim another angled line. Okay, so let me lift that up so you can see it. So we marked at 1/2 inch down here, and then 2 inches at the top, 1/2 inch at the bottom, or 2.5 at the bottom. Then we're going to pretend that this is now our starting point, and we've already marked our 1/2 inch. Then we're going to do another 2 inches, which ends up being 4. And then another 2.5, which ends up being 4.5. And you can keep going if your strip is long enough. Then you can bring in your little trimmer, whatever kind of trimmer you want, put it on that angle and trim it to create the angle like that. And then we'll move along, line up our marks, and give a little trim. So what we end up with is this shape of a strip. And if we keep trimming down, go to our next marks, and there's another piece. And of course we can erase our pencil lines. Now, for this pattern, we need things that have the angle going that way, but we also need ones with angles going this way. And now cardstock, especially white cardstock, you could flip it over and do that, and you would automatically have your angles going 2 different ways. However, with pattern papers, if you don't want to use the pattern on the back, or if it's a direction-specific kind of pattern, then you may want to do something a little bit different. So let me show you the little bit different. So we've got those ones already done. Now what we're going to do is we're going to mark at 1/2 inch, but instead of marking at the bottom, we're going to mark our 1/2 inch at the top. It's that simple. And then we're going to come and mark our 2 inches at the bottom, and then our 2.5 at the top. And if we then shift and pretend that this is our 1/2 inch mark, then we're going to mark it at 4 at the bottom and 4.5 at the top. Once you see this pattern coming together, it will make all the more sense. So you just have to bear with me while we're talking about how to trim these. Now, I'm not using white cardstock for my little pieces. And again, we're just lining up our marks and trimming. One good thing to check to make sure that you're kind of getting a nice 45-degree angle is, especially if you have a little trimmer like this that has all these ruled lines, you can see that this first angle runs parallel with the vertical lines on your trimmer. And if it was turned like this and it was going not parallel with those lines, it was intersecting with them, then you would know that you're not on a good angle and that maybe you need to recheck your measurements, okay? So then we end up with pieces that are angled the other way. But again, if I was using plain cardstock, then not such a big deal. I can just flip it over to create a different angle. But with pattern paper, it's a little bit more dicey. You gotta do the measuring. Hey Mom, nice to see you're watching. So we're gonna create 24 angled pieces, and you may want to cut them as you build your pattern. Because you may decide, oh, I want one angled this way and one angled that way, and you may have to cut some different than others. So when I was doing it, when I first started out, I cut out 6 little angled pieces of 4 different pattern papers. Then I did 3 angling one way and 3 angling the other. It didn't really work out. because I needed some that were a little bit different. And I ended up adding a couple more patterns in there. And I also ended up recutting a couple of the pieces. So it's almost better if you can't plan it out ahead of time, because sometimes our brains don't think through the whole process ahead of time. If you can't plan it out ahead of time, how many of each angle of each pattern, then just cut a few and start creating. Cut a few more, keep creating, you know, that kind of thing. So I have got patterns from the Cozy Up collection here. So I've got this nice scarlet stripy number. I've got this nice little petite leafy number. I've got, what else have I got? I've got lots of things. And hopefully I have all the pieces that I need. Whew, wouldn't that be great? And then I've got the same stripe again. And I've kind of lost track of where my pattern was going here. I moved something and I think yes, I did. There, that's the missing link. I've got some of the zip strips that have the words on them. Now, I'm allowing my words to be upside down. You may not like that. Actually, I can turn it around and then they're not upside down. They're just on an angle. But this is one of the zip strips in Mocha that has all the fun fall colored words on it. So we're going to take our guidelines, our 6 and our 6, and we're going to start by creating a square in the center. But you will notice that these two angled lines line up one on top of the other like this. So that's where we're headed. So I'm going to need to do some gluing as we do this. And I have my liquid glue here. If this gets a little tedious, I can always use the liquid glue. But we want to line this up so that we get a nice straight line with our angle. And then it comes down and touches the line here below. And then we can flip the next one over and add it. And we're going to create a nice little grid in our background with this fun kind of angled geometric pattern of pattern papers. And I think it's going to look really cool, and we'll try to get it as lined up as we can. So that's why we started with our ruled out lines there. And so I have used the scarlet, I've used the leaves, I've used this zip strip, I've also used another zip strip that has stripes on it. You'll see that in a minute. I'm going to see if I can line this up a little better. It's hard when my hands are in the way of the lines. It may not be exact. I'm not going to guarantee that anything is going to line up exact, because when you're trimming, things just don't always go exactly according to plan. You know that. You've trimmed pieces of paper before. And so we're just going to keep adding. And you want to kind of mix up your patterns. Now on this particular piece, you know, I have 2 of the scarlet together, but I'm okay with that. Okay, so we've got our first 4 on. Now we're going to expand out to the sides. So I'm going to bring in another piece of the ones with the words. Here's the stripy zip strip coming in here. And then we've got another leafy number and another scarlet number coming in. Okay. Now you can mix them up as much as you want. However it works. I kind of just ended up using them however they ended up fitting. I was trying to follow a pattern and I gave up. And I think that often happens when you're using bits and pieces. You have to work with what you got. We know this rule. Work with what you got. Use what you have. And so let's go ahead and add these guys on here. Are you loving these fall colors in the Cozy Up collection? I know Michelle and I were chatting this afternoon. Of course, Michelle loves fall, so the fall colors appeal to her. But they are gorgeous. So in this Cozy Up collection, there's honey butter and sage and mocha and scarlet and what else? Lots of fun things. Those are the kind of the main ones. Paprika. There's toffee in there, I believe, too. Lots of good stuff. Always makes me hungry when I think about all of our colors that we have. I went and stuck that one on crooked. You know what? I think I would be able to help myself a little better if I used some tweezers. So then my fingers would not be getting in the way all the time. Okay. So let's go ahead and add this one down. And then we're just going to keep creating until we get our grid. So I'm going to keep adding these. I think the tweezers are going to be way helpful. Oh, yes. Now I can actually see what I'm doing. Hooray. And if you have to overlap something to make it, you know, get into the space that you want, you can do that. And I'm trying to pick up pieces of paper. We're going to come in with a few more. There's some of that paprika one that has the words on it. And I think this was my next piece. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and start laying more of the pieces on here because I'm having trouble keeping track in my brain where I'm putting things. So we're just going to start laying them on here. And you can see how the pattern grows as you add more and more pieces. Wouldn't it be nice if you could actually stick them down that fast? So the paprika also has words along with the mocha. It creates a nice texture for sure. And I really like that. And then you've got your stripes. And this scarlet one also has subtle sort of mocha on scarlet striping happening. So lots of fun textural things happening. I could have done some mixed media in the background on this too. I could have done a little bit of stamping to create some background elements going on. I could have done some splattering, all that fun stuff. So you can really jazz up this pattern as much as you want. But I thought I would keep it simple for today. And if I create this again, then I can, you know, do something different with it next time. So there we go. Let's add some onto this one. I was thinking I would get these glued up before we started to make it a little quicker, and then I didn't. I was at a crop today. Lots of fun here in Brampton. If you're near the Brampton area, you'll want to check it out. It's the Crazy Crafty Crop. I think that's the official name. And Brenda, who's watching right now, she did a make and take. It was lovely. I haven't quite finished mine, but may get that done tonight. And, oops, there here, I got to make sure that I kind of line up with this and line up with that. And then we're going to pop up here. So I'm going to come back to the center. I think it's always important to kind of go back to the one that's on the line and then work your way out from there. Because if you start away from the line and then work towards the line, you might get out of alignment. Pardon the pun. I don't know. I amuse myself. It's weird, but you know, it is what it is. So let's line up with the line here. Like that. And then we can add our leafy. I like that we have some dark colors on here. We've got some lighter ones. So the leaves, the leaves and the stripes are lighter colored. And then the mocha and scarlet and paprika are all a little darker. And it creates kind of a fun texture. It kind of starts doing a bit of an optical illusion with your eyeballs. So you could really play up this pattern and make it look like drop shadows and all sorts of fun stuff. So I think once you learn, you know, make one, then you could play around with it and create more. I think this would translate onto a card very nicely too. You just maybe want to go to a smaller size so that it fits on a card better, but definitely a fun technique. Alrighty, let's add our next strip on here. Again, we're coming back to that center pencil line, making sure we line up like that. You could even create a template of the square in the center and then kind of stick that down and work your way around it if you were really persnickety. Is that the word? Fastidious about where things were lining up, but I think it's going pretty good here. The best thing to do is when you're cutting, just to try to be as exact as you can when you're marking your lines and when you're trimming it off, and that will help for sure. All right, and then we have it going off like that. I like how it kind of just ends and there's no like square edge around it. Now the original one, they actually did some stitching on the pieces, right, just straight down the center of the pieces, which I thought looked super cool. However, I do not have my sewing machine in here, and you guys don't want to sit here and watch me run it through a sewing machine. You could do faux stitching with your journaling pen, any kind of thing. You could do hand stitching for sure, if you have patience. I might not. Not for hand stitching on a layout. But lots of different things you could do to add a little pizzazz to this. So we're on to our last few pieces, but you can really see how just having a few little 1/2-inch strips of paper can create a whole layout, because literally I had bits and pieces, literally bits and pieces. And look at that, we've created a background. Now, of course, I'm going to bring in a little bit of cardstock, and I've done some die cutting using an older die set, thin cuts. And I like to be able to do that when you can take a newer collection and mix it with some older stamps or some older thin cuts and cardstocks and titles and things, and just create a way and create something new, maybe a little bit unexpected, because it's pulling on things from that you've already got in your stash, just to extend your collection. I always figure if you've bought the tools, the stamps and the thin cuts, then you need to figure out ways to use them over and over again, because that's what tools are for. Tools get used over and over again. Again, with the stenciling, that would be fun on here too. You could create this pattern with a stencil. It wouldn't have to be paper strips, but this was a fun way to use those paper strips that I had. What was left? And this one's not lining up quite right. Doo-dah. I think I trimmed it a little long. Let me check. Yeah, it looks all right. It's just not lining up great. We've done pretty good, though. We've gotten pretty much this far. What I will do is I'm just going to hand trim a little smidge off of this to make it work. I'm just going to take a little tiny sliver off the end. This paprika one, if you look closely at my layout, you will see that sometimes the words are going across the strip and sometimes they're going along the strip, and that's because I just had little bits and pieces, and some were one way, some were the other. So it kind of mixes it up a little bit. And I think I managed to get all of my mocha words going the right direction. I had some upside down before, and now they all seem to be right way up. So yay, did that. Now we can go ahead and erase those pencil lines that we added at the beginning. a little bit harder to get the erasey bits out of the center there. I'm going to blow on it. That didn't work. We'll just wipe it. And all the way across. So when you're doing that, making yourself guidelines, you want to write really gently with your pencil so that you don't indent your paper or leave too much graphite or whatever kind of pencil you have behind. And you also want to make sure that you have a good eraser. Now this pencil actually has a good eraser. But another kind of eraser that I recommend is like a vinyl, white vinyl art eraser, because that's good for getting stuff off and not making a mess and smearing and all that fun stuff that happens when you try to erase stuff. Michelle saying it's looking awesome. Yay! It is a great way to use up zip strips. So if you're somebody who doesn't often use your zip strips and you have a whole container full of zip strips that you've never used, you might want to try one of these layouts. Now, I want to bring in my photos. We're not actually going to do a lot of embellishing on this layout. We're keeping it pretty simple. But the photos that I'm using today are of my daughter, and she has been asking for like 3, maybe even 4 years to get her hair cut and cut short. And some of us have been resisting that. I wouldn't want to mention any names. Daddy. Pardon me. So Julia had rather long hair, and so she finally got the go-ahead to get her hair cut, and so she went and got her hair cut, and this picture was taken the same day, within an hour and a half of each other, and oh my goodness, it's like she aged 2 years in 1 hour. So now she has a shorter haircut. Her nice red hair is no longer long and dangly. It's a little bit shorter. And so she was super happy with that. And Daddy had to be okay with it. So I have actually printed these at about 2.5 by 3 3/8, just because I wanted to be able to see some of that background without covering all of it up. Inevitably, backgrounds are backgrounds because you're going to cover them up. And I've added some foam tape on here. So I always like to say that backgrounds are backgrounds. So even if you took the time to put all the things in behind, even where the photos are going to go, don't worry about covering them up. That's what it's there for. That's why you did it, because you wanted to create your layout. So I'm going to go ahead and put one here kind of on an angle. And then I've got this one, and I didn't put any foam tape in the bottom corner because I want the two photos to kind of overlap each other. And I'm putting them on my layout in order of before and after. In case you're wondering why one then the other, before and after. But I'm pretty sure that all of you could have figured that one out. And I also want to add a title for this. And so for my title, I decided I was going to use, where's the package? The Woodgrain die cuts, the Alphabet Woodgrain die cuts. And the wonderful thing about the Alphabet Woodgrain die cuts, they're a beautiful color the way they are. However, because it's paperboard, you can change the color. So I'm going to just scooch the layout out of the way here. Click. And bring in my all-purpose mat. Lay this down to protect our table and our Versamat. And I have popped out all the letters that I want. And I'm going to put them on here, and we're going to add some ink to them. Now, you can add ink to these. You can spray them. You can use shimmer brushes on them because it's just paperboard. And so you can go ahead and decorate them all sorts of ways. I'm going to use mocha ink for this because that's one of the lovely coordinating colors from the collection. And I'm just going to kind of use this little wedge from our round sponge, and I was using it today, so that's what made me think of it. And I'm just going to go ahead and add some mocha onto these letters. I'm probably going to end up with mocha colored fingers in the process. But I just want to get that color on there. There we go. Adding some fun color. And I think by darkening this up, hopefully, they will stand out from the background a little bit. We've got that nice shortbread in the background, and the base color of these wood grain letters is very close to the shortbread, I find. So you can use a blending brush to do this, but I thought I'll just go ahead with the sponge, and it kind of makes it look a little dappled. Like that. Kind of gives it a lot of texture, actually. And I'm already getting a very mocha-y finger. But that's okay. We can get dirty. All the way around. Could even take it and just kind of squish it into the ink pad, but might get a little bit too mocha-y. You may not see, if you're doing a darker color like this, you may not see as much of the wood grain coming through, and that's okay. Doesn't have to be. And we're almost there. So I decided to give this the title, Growing Up. We let her make her own decision about cutting her hair. You know, it's kind of nice when they're little. And you just take them to the hairdresser, and the hairdresser does what the parent says. But when they get to be 13, oh my goodness, 13, yeah, they start wanting to make all those decisions themselves. And once they're 13, you kind of need to let them make those decisions sometimes, right? And something as simple as getting a haircut, you know, it'll grow back. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Barbara Coloroso, and she talks about, you know, the haircuts and things, and she's like, yeah, you know what, it's just gonna grow back. So no need to worry about it. All right, so let's bring in our layout, and we're going to stick it back down. There we go, and decide where we're going to put our title. And I'm hoping that it will fit pretty nicely underneath the photos here. I got to get all the little bits and pieces on, and then we're going to have to glue it down. And hopefully not make a muck, because now I've got ink on here. And then I'm going to use liquid glue, probably, to stick this down. There we go. So, grow, wing, up. Nice. I think that looks good. Okay, so for this, I'm going to use liquid glue. I'm going to do the technique where I add glue to my hand. And this is my favorite technique for attaching glue to funky shaped items, using my tweezers here, and then just tapping it in the glue and sticking it on. And now I'm not going to attempt to get this straight. There is no way that I will end up with this title straight. So we're just not going to try, and then it'll look wonky on purpose. It's another one of my favorite techniques, wonky on purpose. Grow. You could add these with foam tape if you have the patience. Make them pop a little bit. Grow. Oops, trying to pull the backing off. Don't need the background to come off. We just stuck it down. Growing. Gonna need a little bit more glue for the last 4. Tap, tap, tap. How many of you have tried doing this technique where you put the glue on your hand? If you don't like the feel of glue on your hand, some people don't. Some people don't want weird things on their skin. That's understandable. You can do this on the Versamat too. You can put a little puddle of glue on the Versamat. And I actually need a smidgen more glue for the very last one. You can also put it on a stamp block. You can put it on a piece of packaging, leftover packaging, all sorts of things. But have you tried doing this where you tap your piece into the glue to get it glued up when you're doing something that's small? It's basically the lo-fi version of a Xyron. Just adding sticky to the back. All right, I'm going to just wipe the glue off my hand. There we go. And if you're one of those kids in public school who like to peel glue off your hand, that method appeals to a lot of people. Michelle says she used to avoid skinny dies until you saw this trick. Awesome! Yay! You used it at the crop today. Fabulous. That's the great thing about it. Your hand always comes with you when you go to a crop. You don't need an extra tool. And you know what? Now that I went ahead and wiped that off my hand, I'm going to need to use that technique again. I went ahead and used this older retired Leaf Layers Thin Cut die, and this particular one right here, to create some embellishments for the layout because we've got leaves going on in the background. And I cut out 3 of them in Paprika. When you're cutting out small, kind of intricate dies like this, it's a good idea to put a shim under your bottom plate so your shim doesn't get cut. It's under the plate, just gives a little extra pressure if you need it on your machine. If you have the Close to My Heart machine, you can dial up the pressure yourself. Mine is an old machine that doesn't have that knob to dial up the pressure, and so I just add a shim. And if it still doesn't cut, which mine did perfectly fine because they work really well. If it doesn't cut, flip it over to the back side and use a little bit of sandpaper just to release those last little fibers that are trying to hold on, and then you'll just be able to pop everything right out. So here we've got some of these paprika leaves, and like I said, just cleaned off my hand, and now I'm going to get it dirty again. Oh well. Same trick. Let's add a little bit of adhesive, and I'm not going to add it all the way up the leaf, just at the very base. And then we're going to tuck a couple leaves in here. I don't mind the end being free like that to kind of lift and be dimensional. Tuck a couple in there, and we're kind of coming outside of our little grid, which is fun. And then, let's see, grab it a little closer so I can exert a bit of pressure on to get some glue on there. And then we're going to tuck one in down here, like that. And like I said, we are not going to do a lot of embellishing on this layout because I think it's kind of fun the way it is. But again, I gave you lots of tips of things you could do. But let's bring in some of these red dots, some little embellishments, and I have some little scarlet hearts here that I haven't used. So I thought that would be fun just to add a few of these. Maybe stick one up there and a couple little guys down here, and that'll kind of create a nice little triangle with those 3. And then again we can come over here and we can put one beside the up just to kind of point to the title, but then we could even add a couple up here by the photos. And again, we're creating another little triangle there. And that's it. I'm going to leave some nice space. I can do journaling all the way around the edge and create a nice little border with journaling. I could tuck a little tag in the side here to add my journaling. I could journal inside the pattern as well, or just add a little bit of journaling at the bottom. So that is our completed layout using bits and pieces to create a layout. So when you've only got just a couple little strips of paper left, you can still create a whole layout just by angling those strips and creating a bunch of them in various patterns. You can work in the mix-in papers for that, the zip strips, cardstock. You could even stamp on cardstock to create some if you needed a few extra little pieces, and just lining them up in that grid, starting out with your guidelines to keep everything straight. You could continue this pattern right to the edge of the layout, but I think it's fun to kind of stop. If you were going to do a 2-page layout, I would continue right to the edge and carry right on across the second page, or at least part way across the second page, maybe add pattern or journaling down the one side so that you could have a 2-page layout with this. But then we added in our photos using a little foam tape to give it some dimension. We added in some die cut little leaves, so we're not adding any extra pattern, but we're still adding a bit of texture and color this way and kind of giving those photos a spot to sit. And also our title helps give our photo a spot to sit. And again, we just inked right on those wood grain die cut alphabets. So those are kind of fun because you can create any color you want. And then a few little blings just for fun. And I hope you guys enjoyed seeing that bits and pieces layout come together. And if you decide to create one of your own using this technique, then be sure to snap a photo of it and put it in the comments when I post the picture of my layout, because I would love to see what you create. Have a wonderful evening and a great rest of the week ahead. And we will see you again soon. Toodaloo. Bye.